Those were the sounds from the Holsten household on the night of Saturday, December 1st, 1900, in Medora, Iowa. Prosperous farmer John Holsten was murdered in his bed next to his wife by blows to the head by an axe. His wife, Margaret, reported not hearing anything, however. So naturally, suspicion was risen, and she was consequently arrested at his funeral. Court proceedings began on April 6, 1901, where she was reported as being stoic through the whole court proceedings, being cited as unwomanly. Neighbors and family did not talk, and even the dog was considered a witness. 5 days after the trial began, Mrs. Margaret Holsten was found guilty and sentenced to life. 1 year later, there was a retrial, and she was found not guilty by reason of a hung jury of 9 guilty and 3 not guilty. Margaret never talked about that night after that, however. A little bit of backstory of the family. Both John and Margaret were natives of Scotland. John was born in 1841 and Margaret was born in 1843. John was a farmhand for Margaret's father. They were married in Illinois in 1863. He was 26 and she was 23. Between the two of them, they had 10 to 12 children. It is alleged that they had a troubled marriage and fought often, with reports of domestic violence and abuse of the children. Some reports say Margaret angered John by taking the children's side. She shared the problem but was urged to make it work, and of course the advice favored him. Margaret died in 1916 and was ironically buried next to her husband in the family plot. Now, if that had happened today, the abuse would have been used to alleviate the guilt of the woman. Trifles written by Susan Glassell, who was a reporter for the first trial, however, differs from the real story. In the play, the woman was also laying in bed next to her husband when he was murdered, but he was strangled. The neighbor walked in and found the wife sitting in a rocking chair, and she was dazed and plainly said that he was dead and pointed him in the direction of which he was. When the men came in the house, they talked about the cleanliness of her home and said that she was not a very good woman because her house was not very clean. Mrs. Wright did not have any children, and before she was married to John Wright, she was Little Miss Minnie Foster, the town girl who sang in the choir. But John was not the most cheerful person and was said to have wrung her bird's neck and not only taken that away from her, but the joy of singing. And the women, Mrs. Hale and Mrs. Peters, take her side and try to figure out what happened. When they find the bird, they hide the bird in their pocket for her, which is the only thing that provides a motive for Mrs. Wright killing her husband. So, you tell me, was the woman justified in killing her husband, or was this just another act of crime?